Hey guys, Scott Short here at Empire Home Loan Corporation. My NMLS number is 225998. My California DRE license is 01074493. Ouch. Go ahead, my partner.
Hey, I'm Keith Dunnagan, managing shareholder at BPE Law Group. Good to be here with my good buddy Scott.
Thank you. So what's your license number? Just kidding.
Oh,
Just
I got
kidding.
lots of them, but I don't have to disclose those.
That's right. But I do. A lot of people don't do it, which drives me batty because you and I know about this. You have to disclose these things, but I ain't the police, so we'll go ahead. So today, Mr. Keith and I were talking about something's been around for a minute. How long has this little lawsuit been? It seems like it's been some years.
Several years. It's probably been around 3-4 years. I think I went back and looked. I want to say we wrote an article on this back in like 2019. So some of this stuff predates COVID. It's kind of crazy.
So let's talk. So what are we talking about? So what is this lawsuit about, and what's your thoughts on this thing? How it's going to play out, or just your thoughts? There we go.
Well, I don't know how it's going to play out. If I had that crystal ball, I'd be selling my services to the plaintiff's lawyer or the defense lawyer. Right. But you know what we're talking about is this. I think it's pronounced Moral, Morehl, versus National Association of Realtors. There's another companion case. I don't remember the name, but they're getting ready to go to the trial. And really what this is looking at is kind of looking at the alleged, and that's what it is. It's an allegation, the alleged anti-competitive effect of having a seller pay both the selling agent and the buying agent's commission. And so you have these two lawsuits that are coming up. They've finally figured out how MLS works a little bit, right? You know, a lot of people think that the MLS is just this ethereal website database that's controlled by a single outpost somewhere out in the ether, right? That magically shows up and tells us where all the properties. They finally figured out that almost all these MLSs are owned and operated by a group or a consortium of local associations. And so what they're saying is, you know, they're looking at this and going, hey, you know, the MLS has a giant market share on the database and the transmission of listing information, right? We have competitors coming in. You have things like Redfin and Zillow and Trulia and all these different knockoffs that are trying to get into the space to be clearinghouses for listing information. But the chief player has been and probably always will be MLS because it's functionally locally owned, right? And so what they're saying is because realtors functionally have to participate in these local associations if they're members of NAR, then by doing that, they have to participate in MLS. And if they participate in MLS has rules that says if you participating in MLS and you're using our services, which I think the statistics currently suggest that about 80 to 85% of property searches are done through the MLS. That's a pretty big market share in a how many billions of dollars a year revenue stream. If you have to participate, if you participate in MLS, MLSs have rules that say the listing broker has to share compensation with the cooperating broker, which takes out that negotiating effect. It deprives the seller of the ability to say, no, I don't agree to sell or to pay for the buyer's representation. You know, if a seller said that and then the listing was put on MLS has disciplinary authority in almost all of these situations to go, look, you didn't comply with the MLS rules. So that discipline that comes down is maybe it's a slap on the wrist, maybe it's a suspension, maybe it's a fine, maybe you lose your privileges to use MLS altogether. And no realtor wants that when MLS controls 80 to 85% of the market share. So the plaintiff's lawyers are saying, based on these rules, it's functionally become anti-competitive, and it's a violation of antitrust laws. And really what it fundamentally does is it attacks the industry as a whole, which could, depending on which way it goes, it'll either A, strengthen the industry if NAR is successful in defending these claims. If not, it's going to undermine and rewrite the entire industry.
So thinking about, this conversation that, used to be the realtors had the, all information by themselves. They kept it very secret, they had their books and stuff at their office. Now it's gone to the internet, and I got Zillow and all these other guys have the information. Does that help in the conversation, or is that not even play in?
Well, I mean, I think the problem is it hurts at some level the NAR because you have all of this information that used to be very secretive because let's go back 30 years before I was involved in real estate law, but I know enough and have family that was in it. Back then, all of your listings were done one of two ways, right? You had some that would go into the newspaper section that the MLS had, but a lot of it was brokers would talk to each other. That concept of the broker open, we're going to have a property that's going to hit the market for an open house on Friday, but on Tuesday, we're going around to all these marketing meetings that all the real estate brokerages have, and we're pitching our wares. And we're hosting that broker open, and we're getting the Caldwell Bankers and the Keller Williams and the Remaxes and the Century 21s and the XPs, and I probably left a few out. I didn't mean that. I'm going off the cuff. But you would go around and you would use this internal relationship model to get people to move around and see these houses. Now, with MLS having a very predominant location on the website, on the internet, having 80 to 85% of the searches for real estate going through their system, you've put all this information that used to be very close-handed, you've made it very easy to find. And that at some level can impact and have a draconian effect on the antitrust defense, because it shows the level of market share or market control that they have, and that's a potential problem.
So I know from my world, trying to think a home buyer of a property having money extra to pay the realtor is pretty slim. So from your standpoint, if this thing came down saying, hey, seller's going to pay his part, buyer's going to pay his part, that doesn't sound good for real estate in the future reference to going forwards. I mean, how do you?
So let's just say this: not all buyers are created equal, right? So this is not a problem in the $1 million sales world. They've got the cash to buy $1 million home. They got a couple $100,000, $250,000 they're putting down. They're getting that jumbo loan. They got a little extra cheese on the side that they can pay their realtor. What this hurts, it hurts the 70%. It hurts the it hurts the first-time home buyer. It hurts the mom and dad who have a couple of children and they're trying to move up into their second home. A lot of these people are living paycheck to paycheck as it is. They're qualifying for FHA loans. They're taking 3.5% down. They're doing everything they can do to get in, or maybe they're fortunate and they're able to get 10% down so they can get onto a conventional rate, but they're stretching their budget to get there. It's that 70%. It's that large swath of America that loses out because they don't have the ability to go out, buy the house, pay the fees to secure the loan, pay the fees to get their inspections. And then on top of that, now you're telling me I've got to come up with 2.5% to pay my realtor. Maybe it's a different story in some places in America where your average house price or average home sale is 150,000. But here in Sacramento County, where I think the median, I think I was looking not too long ago, and I want to say one of the lowest price points I saw on a home in Sacramento is like $418,000, somewhere in there. Where the median house sale right now, I think, is what, 580,000, something like that. Where are these first-time home buyers that are stretching to get into these 400 and 500,000 starter homes? Where are they going to find that extra 2.5%, that extra $9 or $10 or $12,000 to write that check, to stroke the check and get that realtor paid? It's not coming out of their pocket. And with lending restrictions being what they are, post Dodd-Frank, post recession, where's the funding? They're not going to be able to come to the table and fund that either.
Well, let's say if you did a first-time homebuyer program, right? They have all the money packed in there to help one down on closing costs. I would assume it's considered a closing cost that you may be able to do that way, but those guys need all that penny and more to qualify, to get in. So it's crazy. So where at this point do you see those two sorts? It's SITZR is one of them, and MOEHRL is the other one. So do you know where they're sitting at right now in the process, or what do you see?
Yeah, so that first one, the Sitzer, SITZR, I think it's Sitzer. It's supposed to go to trial in October of this year, is what I understand. It's the smaller of the two cases. And I believe I believe it's scheduled for trial in October. The moral case, I believe it's scheduled for like March or April of next year. So both of these are very close to their trial date. Now, my guess is they'll probably work out some sort of a settlement. Nobody really wants this case to get tried. Nobody really wants to know what the answer is, because if they get the answer, if the plaintiffs get the answer they want, it fundamentally changes the way real estate is done, or can, absent regulation. And if they do, I mean, you think about this. You look at Moral, you look at Sitzer. Neither one of these that I'm aware of affect the California market. So the plaintiffs' lawyers have kind of protected the California market to see what happens here. But I can almost guarantee if the plaintiffs get a victory in these cases, California is on the list. Because, I mean, let's think about it. We got 39 million people. We have the largest real estate market in the country by far. They won't waste any time filing here.
So a question for you, let's say that this goes down and the buyer has to find a representative. If they had to hire you as an attorney, I'm assuming it's going to cost more than 2.5%.
Depends.
Okay.
It depends. A lot of times, because we don't deal with the marketing and we don't deal with all of the work that goes into getting a house on the market and listing it. A lot of times all we're doing is telling people, go do this due diligence, look at this part of the contract. For us, this is the one area in law where I'm probably cheaper than a real estate broker, but I'm not a better substitute. I'm not going to go out and look at the home. I'm not going to be able to tell you. I'm a lawyer. I can't go walk around the house and go, well, the undulation on this part of the property could result in flooding. I don't know. Put words on a paper. I can figure that out. Don't ask me to say, are these up-to-date finishes? Is this top shelf, top of the line quality cabinets and ground and countertop? I don't know. I walk in and go, that's pretty, or that's not pretty. I like that. I don't like that.
At least you avoid fair housing issues. I know that part.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that one. Pretty good at that one.
So,
but yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. I mean, we have real estate professionals for a reason. They provide a valuable service, not only to the seller, but to the buyer, because of their experience and their relationships. There is an intrinsic value to this. I mean, the reality, I bought my house. I'm a real estate lawyer. I know the legal side of this fairly well. I'm okay at what I do. And even when I bought my house, the first thing I did is I hired a real estate agent. I need their experience and their assistance, to help point me in the right direction. They know about neighborhoods. They know which schools are good, which schools may not perform as well. They know where there's certain types of services that, a family might need. They know all that information. You don't want to take that out of the equation for a buyer.
So I think NAR has had some success in some of these cases before. Do you know what's played out before?
A lot of times they settle. So like that was the big one, right? The DOJ was doing the investigation in the TAN case. TAN case goes away because NAR and the DOJ cut a deal. They settle. The DOJ then has second thoughts and tries to renege, and the court says, no, you settled, you're done, and you're out. So a lot of these cases have settled. And I think a lot of it, if I remember right, there was a case against the San Diego MLS probably 25 years ago. And that was, I think that was one of these precursors to some of these lawsuits. And San Diego got beat up really, really bad. And so I think as a result, like San Diego has now been busted up. And I think they have like 6 MLSs down there to deal with that entire market area because of some of the anti-competitive rules. I could be wrong, but that's vaguely what I remember. So you have seen this in the past, but I think a lot of these cases end up settling out of a courtroom because nobody wants to know what that effect is. Because
Where'd you go, man?
That moral case is big enough. I think it's $20 billion that they're seeking. That's billion with a B, not with an M. You know, that's a lot of money. That one might actually end up in the courtroom because I think that one's probably big enough that it's unsettlable. You know,
and then sad part is, if these go through or get settled out, you're encouraging more people to jump on the bandwagon because it's free money.
Yeah.
So
it's better to. Here's the messed up part of my world, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's better to settle and encourage more settlements than to actually face the risk of the ultimate liability that could completely unwind a business.
So you said one's going to come up in October this year, next one's going to be next year. So we got to keep an eye on that. So definitely got to do a recap in maybe October, whenever this, thing goes down. So
trial, I think, is supposed to happen in October. So we may not actually have any rules, because my guess is this is probably going to be a month and a half, maybe 2 months of trial testimony. The issues are significant enough that it's going to take a while. And even if it takes a while, it's all that information is going to come into the court, and it may take a while for a decision to be rendered. And even if that decision is rendered, one way or the other, I can guarantee it's going up on appeal. Somebody's going to take this thing up.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's just amazing, because it's sad part, because I don't think a lot of people know exactly what realtors do and how much they do and how many people are involved in these conversations until you have a problem, right? And then you see how much the control is. But usually the realtor controls the problems behind the scene that you never know about them. You go, oh, it's easy peasy, I can do this stuff. Well, if you knew the easy peasy on this side, that was going, oh, heck no, that's insane. And that's, and you see a lot of stuff as a lawyer saying, hey, we go through stuff here and things do unravel. And you get involved. Maybe we're talking earlier about the whole thing. This might just insanity thinking this thing. We talked about this earlier, that let's say if this did happen and the listing agent is going to be the only person getting paid, that they break apart between the listing agent for representing the seller, then another agent on the same team representing the buyer on the same broker. But you came out saying there's something that does not allow that. So can you break that down?
Well, so dual agency is allowed, but there was a case that came out about 8 years ago now. It's called the Hariki case, and very important case in the state of California that says, look, the way it works in California, it used to be that we all assumed, and by we, real estate professionals, assumed that if it was the agent who was representing a buyer, that agent had a fiduciary obligation to that buyer. And if a different agent even from the same broker was representing a seller, that agent had the fiduciary obligation to the seller. Hariki came out and said, hold on, let's back up. Under California Civil Code, a real estate salesperson only has the authority to act in this capacity if they're acting underneath the broker. So because the independent salesperson does not have that independent authority, that authority drives from the broker, the dual agency or the dual representation starts at the broker. And so what that meant is that, okay, now dual agency has to be dealt with anytime, two people in the same brokerage. It may not even be two people from the same team. It may be two people on two different teams, but they all work at the same broker and they all have the same broker of record. Think about some of these franchises in California. Some of these franchises are very, very large. I'm not going to name any names, but some of these are very, very large. They have one broker of record, but that one broker of record may have 25 offices and they may have 1,000 agents working for them. But because that one broker of record is the broker that everybody works under, everybody that does a deal within those 25 offices together, they all have to do the dual agency. And if even one person messes that up, that creates potential liability, right? And so that's the issue. That's the issue we look at, is even if they pass this and it begins to fundamentally change, some people say, well, maybe we'll get dual agency. Maybe that'll rise more. Maybe we'll have one team that's doing the deal so they can spread the money out amongst their team. You still have the dual agency problem. One of the things that I do foresee that could happen in that scenario is you'll have a listing broker who will have a team. Maybe they have a team of 10 or 12 agents. Maybe they have a team of 25 agents. They're going to go, we're not going to charge 3%. We're going to charge 4.5%. We're going to charge 4.5% or 5%. You're going to pay us 4.5% or 5% no matter what. but we have the right to, from a business standpoint, make those payments to any agent that we want to make, which means so we're not obligating ourselves to pay a cooperating broker, but we can go, hey, I've got my buy side team and my sell side team. I'm going to assign a buy side representative to a buyer. I'm going to assign a sell side representative to a seller. The seller is going to be obligated to make that payment, and it's going to come to me, the brokerage house. And however I decide to pay my agents, I get to make that decision. That's my choice. It may actually, the unintended consequence of a bad decision like on this case may encourage more dual representation because it's easier to monetize.
Do you think that the conversation maybe in the same vein is saying, hey, if I'm an agent from another company, I want to refer that buyer to you and get a referral fee? How do you see that playing out?
Maybe, but that presupposes that buyer is going to have the ability to make the commission payment to their buyer's representation that would afford or allow for that buyer's representative to make that referral fee payment. I think that's a lot less likely than seeing an increase in the dual agency, because it's easy to monetize dual agency. That's very easy because you're just going to set a higher fee for the service as a listing broker. I think when you send a lot of these people and say, hey, you got to go out, you got to find your own buyer's representation and you got to pay for it yourself, I think you close the market down to a lot of people. I think that's a problem.
Gotcha. So I like this conversation, but I don't like this conversation.
No, I mean, it's a sticky situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fundamental flaw with the argument, and I've looked at this a little bit, is the plaintiffs are coming out and saying, well, by making the sellers pay this, you're adversely affecting the consumer. I say, well, which consumer? The buyer as a consumer is not being affected because the seller's paying for it. But your argument that, by having the seller pay for more, you're enticing more agents to actually bring buyers to it, thereby increasing the price. But isn't that good for the seller? Isn't it good for the buyer that they're getting representation and they're not paying for that? I mean, yes, indirectly they're paying for it because they're paying for it through the purchase price that they pay, for the home. But they're not writing the check directly. But isn't the seller being rewarded too, because they're getting potentially, as they allege, a higher price? I don't know that commissions by themselves result in higher prices. I don't think that. I mean, I can see the argument, I can see the intellectual side of it. I think from a monetary standpoint, we still have a really good regulator called a bank that says, I'm not going to overloan on these properties. That's why we get appraisals. That's why we say, look, we're going to cap loans at a certain percent, because we believe that at some level, that if we loan it at an X value, that if we have to foreclose, we can take it back, we get that back. Or that if they have to sell, they're going to be able to sell it for enough to pay the loan back. 2008, 2012 aside, that's a reality. It did happen. But we have these other things in place that create benefits. And I think if we get too focused on one benefit, we miss the bigger picture and the harm that can be done with an incorrect decision.
I know from a lending standpoint, we have an issue with arm's length transactions because so much hanky panky from the past.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much that will drive in that conversation. There was so many, it's like we chopped the head off of, a snake and all these other heads come out like, so that's stuff you don't know what's going to happen. So.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it, we're speculating. I think a lot of us are thinking about what could happen and what will happen. I mean, I remember, when Hariki first came out and I was teaching classes about structure to local associations, I said, look, if this, I made a prediction that was terribly wrong. I said, look, if this continues, if they're going to tighten up these rules, are we going to continue to see the large, massive brokers, because it's going to functionally cut them to only half the deal? And I pondered and postulated a little bit about, well, maybe we'll see more smaller brokers that are catering to one side of a transaction so that these issues don't happen. I was wrong. Didn't happen. Didn't happen that way. Now, there were some things that happened with Hariki and some of the laws, and that's what allows the current structure to stay in place. But the markets adapt, and the industries adapt, and as these things happen, laws change, and who knows what'll happen. If a bad decision is made, and we look at this and go, we really need to address this because now buyers are being taken advantage. They have no representation. How are we going to deal with this? We want to make sure we protect them. The laws will swing on the pendulum to kind of resolve that. The other thing that's going to happen, people that have a good savvy about real estate, they're going to go, well, I know how to get more traction. Just because the law says I don't have to pay the buyer's broker doesn't mean I can't make the offer. And if you think about your home sale as a business decision, you go, I mean, I could almost guarantee that if this ruling comes down and it's adverse to the real estate industry, if I want to sell my house, I'm probably more likely than not going to offer a cooperating broker compensation because I want him or her to bring a pile of people through my house because they're going to get paid. And people are going to make that decision.
Yep. I saw the article that mentioned about, and it's just, I mean, you see this in the industry, never told about, but let's say if a house is having a problem getting sold, I don't know if it's, just because the market, maybe the price, who knows what the problem is, by seeing where they'll put in the MLS, non-seen disclosures, they'll pay a higher percentile to the buyer's agent than, to help them. And sometimes it comes to the property, or you see where some builders do not cooperate with realtors, and somehow those builders are not being, promoted by the realtor, which is, it's a business decision, right? But is that a
business decision?
Does that seem like any problems there, or is that just business?
It's just business. Okay. I mean, realtors have known this for a long, long time. That if the local custom is 5 or 6%, and you offer 7 or 8, you're gonna get some attention.
Exactly.
People got to pay mortgage payments. They got to pay their boat payments. They got to pay their mortgage payments. They got to put food on the table. They got to pay the car payment. In California, I mean, we're coming into the 4th of July weekend. They got to pay the AC bill,
Yeah.
Because we're gonna need it. I mean, I think I walked out of the house this morning, and it was already north of 80. We're in for a warm one today, Scott.
What's Bert behind you say? What's his perfect temperature?
His perfect temperature is about 72 degrees.
Bert's is bored behind him. You can't see him. You can see his lip. You see his lip of bored. There's Bert. Hi, Bert.
Yeah, that's Bert.
That's our favorite. I like Bert when we're doing the COVID time. He had a mask on. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Life is short. You got to have fun, right?
Exactly. So I appreciate this. So we're going to circle around back probably October, November, whenever, and do what Paul Harvey says. Let's get the rest of the story, right?
Well, we'll get a piece of the story. You got to remember, Moral, that's the biggest case. That's the one that's not going to go probably until March or April of next year.
2024. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But, if the Seitzer case goes, that'll give us an indication of what the court temperament is. So we'll see, we'll see.
So just, you don't know this probably top of your head, but do you know how many cases have been before these guys been settled out, or do you know how many cases there's been, or is that just a handful?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think this, my suspicion is probably there's one going on all the time. It's just, there's I think 800 and some different MLSs. I think that's what I think it's 840-ish. I think that's the number. Don't quote me. I could be wrong. Could be way more than that. Could be way less than that. 840 seems light. So
the question, before I go off, my brain is popcorn. It goes crazy. So do you see anybody suing the local association versus NAR? NAR's got the big pockets. They got big fat dollars. But do you see any, individual going after the local association, or is that kind of
no? It economic, unless you're going after like the San Francisco Association or the Los Angeles Association or like the Chicago Association or New York, a major metropolitan area where there's literally hundreds of millions of dollars, funneling around every year. These types of cases are really, really expensive to deal with. it economically doesn't make sense.
Plus, you crash an entire, local association. If you had that one lawsuit, just one suit, that just take that company out. It's just like bye bye, and that'd be bad because you and I know this. The local associations, be it local or CAR, California Association, or the NAR, they fight for property rights. They fight for people. I don't know. I mean, what you see in reference to legislation comes out, and the realtors will fight hard as they can to make sure the property owners are protected. But a lot of people don't see that, and they basically they focus on this piece here. It's going,
well, you know why they don't see that, right, Scott?
But
the one thing that you can count on with human nature is they look at the things that directly affect them, that they can feel. Writing a check, they feel that. That is something they see on the closing statement. They get that. The work that the local associations and the state associations do behind the scenes at the legislative level to help property owners, nobody sees that. Nobody realizes the hundreds of real estate laws that are on the books that local associations and the state association have fought for. People don't see, I remember, back in COVID working with, some of the local associations on some of the rules coming down related to home sales and going, this is really bad for people, and the work that was being done at the county and the state level to say, we've got to deal with this. We understand there's a time of crisis. We've got to deal with this, but we can't harm people and homeowners this way because of these rules. Nobody sees that. It's not blared over the mainstream news. It's not published anywhere that's readily findable on Google. It's quietly done in the background. But what they do see, that check that gets stroked for the commission, that they see on the bottom line because they don't get that money in their bank account. And so that's what homeowners tend to focus on. The average human focuses on the things that they perceive directly affect them.
So somebody's question. So I know we wrap up, we're getting long. So when they buy a property, they pretty much already know that agent's getting paid, and it's pretty much the sales price they're buying for. It's already baked in, right?
Yeah.
So if they take this piece out, they're still getting that same dollar figure, but it's not baked in no more. So that's kind of make the buyer a little more frustrated. They're saying, what the heck? So I don't know. That's just, there's so many variables we go to rabbit holes for days. But we shall see. But I'll let you go. So, but let me know, how do people get a hold of you or your company?
Easy. I'm all over the place. Best way to find us, go online, check us out at www.bpelaw.com. That's BPELAW.com. Tons of information there. Phone numbers there. We've got offices now in 3 states. I think my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I'm still having fun. So, yeah.
And also, you have a great newsletter. So if they go to their website, what's the fast way to get subscribe to the newsletter?
Top right-hand corner, there's a button that says subscribe. Smash that button, put in your information, and away we go. And
then last thing. So I know you cover a lot of stuff. I know you do real estate. What kind of laws do you mostly focus on?
Oh, sorry, Scott. That's going to take us 10 hours. No. So we're full service. So real estate really is our bread and butter. We do a ton of real estate, as I'm sure people around the community can attest to. But we also have a niche practice in energy, dealing with oil and gas. We have a niche practice in healthcare where we work with doctors and dentists and healthcare professionals on their business life cycles. We do estate planning. We have an estate planning team that helps people navigate kind of what's going on. How do we do the planning? How do we set up our stuff to pass, in an orderly, expeditious way? We also handle if, life is, there's a couple certainties in life, one is death and one is taxes, right?
Right.
We try as hard as we can to avoid both, and we've never been successful.
Nope.
Even the ones who think they're successful at avoiding taxes end up in jail sometimes. That's how they got Al Capone.
Exactly.
Cool. So, we help people through the probate and the trust administration process. We have a little bit of an employment practice, and we have a litigation practice. So if things go bad, we need to be able to help people navigate the things that are going bad and trying to figure out how do we get them resolved.
Cool. So do you do any stuff like if somebody is in a panic and they're getting foreclosed upon, do you have some consulting pieces for that?
I do that. We do, yeah. We still do that. And it's funny you brought that up. I just saw an article about 2 weeks ago that said California foreclosure notices are up 7% in the last 60 days. So it's becoming real again. You know, the foreclosure moratoriums during COVID are gone. You know, banks are beginning to say, hey, look, you know, we've tried to work this out. I mean, this is a vicious cycle. You know, people got their interest rates and they got their loans back, you know, after 2015, and they're paying, you know, sub 4 for their interest rates. Some people are really lucky and paying sub 3. Loan bankers now are looking at this and going, I got a risky loan, or I got a loan in default. If I go take care of this problem, I get my money back. I can put it back into the market, but I can put it in at 6.5 or 6.75, whatever the rates are today. I think they're somewhere around there.
Yep.
Banks are in the business of making money, and if their rate of return goes up by 3%, they're going to make that decision.
And you're seeing also the big thing people were counting upon, which got obliterated, was student loan forgiveness. So a lot of student loans are going to be back in play.
Yep.
But start August, you're going to start making payments. So if your payment is not in your budget, that's not good.
Yep. Yeah. I haven't read the decision, but I saw the Supreme Court came out today and struck down the student loan forgiveness plan. So I'll have to pull that case, take a look at
it. More reading for you.
I'll have somebody else read it.
All I can say is if you want to be an attorney, I hope you like to read.
Yep.
Well, cool, brother. I appreciate your time. I've probably been over as usual. You're going to send me a fat bill as normal, but it's okay.
Scott, we're good.
I appreciate it, brother. We'll see you later, man. We'll cut this short. So we'll catch you hopefully in maybe in October, November with the next piece of this story, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Cool.